Today I find myself stuck on an alien planet with nothing but my trusty mech and an AI satellite with a terrible southern accent.
Let's put that mech of yours back in one piece.
Earth is no good anymore, and I have taken off the Lightyear Frontier in search of a fresh start. But my ship has crashed on a planet filled with toxic slime. I have 100 days to build up my mech and clear this world of the toxic plants so that I can find a new world to call home. But this is easier said than done. I'll have to navigate these foreign lands in my clunky mech, fight off attacking plants to save my farm, make friends with the local wildlife, and power up my mech enough to be able to take on anything this world can throw at me. This is Lightyear Frontier. Let's get into it. I recovered from the crash landing unharmed and I ran toward my mech. My mech, however, suffered some minor damages and I had to do some quick repairs. I reassembled some broken parts and I boarded my mech as I set off to explore this alien world. I was greeted by an AI satellite named Piper, who was my guide here and would help me with what to do next. Before I could gather any resources, I had to search for my tools. My mech lost its equipment in the crash, so I went off to hunt them down. I first found my saw and I began harvesting some rocks and trees nearby. This handy tool can punch rocks and saw trees. And if this is all I did, I think I'd be okay with it. I've never harvested a rock or a tree in my life and had it feel and sound so satisfying. Oh, yeah. I boosted around on my clunky mech's jet boosters, searching the land for my equipment. I spotted my irrigation hose and I picked it up. There was some toxic looking sludge nearby called noxious slime. The hose could help me remove it. I used the water already loaded up and I cleared out some of the area, and I was already on my way to completing my mission of revitalizing the planet. The first area, Pine Heights, was the first one on my list, and so I got to work clearing the slime. But my water reservoirs were quite limited, so I had to keep searching for my other tools. I thought maybe going into the water could refill it, but my mech does not work in water, so that's a no-no. As I ran toward my next set of equipment, I gathered all the new resources that my saw could collect. I was getting pretty excited seeing all the items I could craft with these newer resources. Barely 10 minutes into the game and I was already quite hooked. I got my siege shooter next, but wasn't sure what to do with it, so I moved on. Nighttime was approaching, so naturally I had to set up camp. I was tasked with getting a workshop and some few other things built. Now that I had some basic resources, I got my beginner workstation set up, a work shed, and an oil presser. But with only limited amounts, I had to head back into the forest to gather a few more things. It took a minute to get used to traversal with my mech.
Hope that didn't scratch the paint.
I found these ancient ruins with artifacts, but they didn't appear to be anything more than a random collectible, so I didn't make much effort to going after them. I explored the new area and I found my next tool, the vacuum harvester. This was how I could suck up some water for my hose. I used it on the nearby pond and I reloaded my water supply. Then I headed over to grab my final tool, the sprout cannon. Again, I wasn't exactly sure what I needed it for, but I'm sure I'll learn soon enough. Now that I had all my tools, it was time to set up a base. I relocated to a new spot and I put down my shed, as well as some standard base stuff like a place to sleep and some storage. I was tasked with crafting some oil, so I used the oil presser to make my first batch of plant oil. And then, very satisfyingly, I transferred it to my mech. Oh, yeah. I used my new tent to pass the night so that I could start fresh with some daylight in the AM. When I woke from my slumber, Piper graciously encouraged me to get to work. Next task was to start farming. I put down my first crop plot, and then I struggled to figure out how to seed it. The sprout cannon was not the answer. That was for planting trees, and so I could only assume I needed to use the seed shooter. That would make sense, but I didn't really have any seeds, so I went out to see if I could find some. I went out and gathered as many resources as I could, and I did some solid exploring. I spent a little more time in Pine Heights, clearing the noxious slime as well. Eventually, I came across some polyberry that instructed me to use my vacuum harvester. I sucked those seeds right up. Once again, a super satisfying feeling. I could actually do this all day. So I headed back to base so that I could get my new seeds planted. I loaded up the seed shooter and fired away. Seriously, I don't know what it is about these mechanics, but they feel so incredibly satisfying. I also planted some trees at my base with the sprout cannon, and as a new day was upon me, my base was under attack. But not by alien creatures, by alien plant life. Noxious seeds falling from the sky were attacking my plants. I busted out my vacuum and I sucked them all up, getting noxious pods for my efforts. I wasn't sure what they were good for, but I imagine they are going to be a useful resource. Anyway, I wasn't exactly sure what happens if you let these weeds hit the ground, but I wasn't ready to find out. I saved my single crop plot and I continued on with my day. I tried scooping up my berries, but it appeared they were not ready yet. So I re-watered them now that they appeared thirsty, and I was just going to have to wait another day for them to fully grow. I tossed down another structure, the fodder oven. Here I could craft treats for the local wildlife, which when I feed them, they drop resources. Resources were already becoming a problem, and I was constantly overwhelmed. So more storage was in order. And then lots and lots of very satisfying tree chopping and rock smashing. At the end of the day, I cozied up my base. By adding structures like a mailbox and a campfire, I can improve the cozy factor, which gives some different benefits to my base. I set back out to do some more exploring. Now that I had some treats, I sought out some of the local wildlife and I fed them some of their treats. They pooped out some resources for me. I made my way back into Pine Heights and began clearing the noxious slime. I had my hose and plenty of water nearby to refill. I started making some pretty good progress, but I cut my efforts short once night came because it was a little difficult to see. So I had plenty more trees to chop down and resources to gather so that I could start expanding my base. I crafted and tossed down an assembler in my workshop. This allows me to craft various parts from raw resources, which I can then use in more advanced structures. I made some aluminum frames so that I could build an upgrade depot. Now I was able to upgrade components of my mech. You can actually physically move things around and color your mech here, but I didn't quite discover that yet. However, what I did unlock for me was the ability to add power-ups to my mech. In order to clear the land of toxic growth, I would need to upgrade some of my tools to clear the tougher sludge. But I can also add optional upgrades, like improving its jet boosters or its max weight, which is definitely a need. After realizing how long these plants take to grow, I knew I need to get more crop plots set up. And then I loaded them up with seeds. Oh, yeah. Next off I was to do more exploring. My objective was to get an upgrade at the depot, but for everything I still needed newer resources. So I explored a new area, but I didn't come away with any of the things that I needed. I got what I could and I headed home to continue expanding my base. I scooped up a bunch more seeds so more crop plots were in order. I planted some trees at my base and color flowers too before heading to bed. I woke up to some weeds in my garden. I guess watering your crops and not seeding them can cause weeds. Good to know. Nothing serious, but they do destroy some of the crops next to them, so it's a good idea to keep those empty plots dry. I got what I needed to craft and do my first mech upgrade. I went with the spiked saw power so that I could begin harvesting higher level resources, stronger trees and tougher rocks. I spotted some forms of metal that I was going to need to get my hands on, so it seemed like the best option to upgrade to start. Everything else though was going to have to wait because I still needed quite a few more resources that I had not yet come across. But now that I felt a little established and I had a sense of what I was actually doing, I headed back to Pine Heights to see if I could finish clearing the sludge. It didn't take too much longer. I found the last of the noxious slime and I washed it away. Piper jumped in and was impressed by my efforts. She was surprised that removing the sludge made things so much better. She let me know that this planet might be salvageable after all as a future home for Earth. This mysterious alien-like door also lit up for me. I assumed it would fully light up and unlock once I clear all the areas. Now I just had to keep going and clear the rest. My new spike saw got me some newer resources, which in turn unlocked more things to craft. And back on the farm in the morning, I had another attack from the atmosphere. Noxious bubbles dropping down from the sky, trying to destroy my crops. But a pretty stress-free bubble popping session. I took care of them quickly with minimal losses to my crops. Now that Pine Heights was clear of the sludge, it actually grew new resources. So I headed back out to collect some new things like these Ravage seeds and red crystal. And after a full day of resource gathering, I went home to see what more ways I could upgrade my mech. I discovered the ability to change its parts, which is really fun. But I didn't have any unlocked at the moment, so I could only use the default ones. In order to get more, I needed to buy them. So I built a merchant landing and I had to wait for them to show up. It didn't take too long though. In the morning she showed up and I took a look at her goods. She had some things I could use, but I didn't have many funds, so I sold a few things off. But nothing I needed to purchase right now, so I held off. I got back to my morning farming routine with watering and planting crops, and I continued planning out my base. I was interested in getting a bigger home and some more upgrades to my mech. but I still needed even more resources that I hadn't yet discovered, so I was definitely in need of some exploring. I headed back out to search some of the undiscovered areas to see what new things I could find. I entered the edge cliffs and started clearing some of the toxic weeds in the area with my vacuum. This area only had these weeds, which was my current level vacuum. I took a little bit of time to search for as many of them as I could and try to fully clear the area. I restored the edge cliffs and once again unlocked some newer resources. I went right on to the next area, the yellow forest. But this area had some tougher weeds and my vacuum was going to need an upgrade in order to clear it. But I still ran around looking for some new resources to farm. However, nighttime does make it a bit hard to see, so I headed home until morning. My rabbit seeds were now grown into plants, and when I sucked them up, it unlocked more items. I was getting more and more things I needed in order to upgrade my Mech. This was going to be important because some of that tougher sludge was going to need upgrades in order to clear it. So I continued to plant more seeds and water them before heading back out to explore. I found some much needed copper ore. I was looking for the ingredients to make copper wire, and this was definitely it. I made my way into another new area, Stepstone Peak, but this area also required much stronger equipment to be able to clear the sludge. For now though, I was just all about unlocking the areas and seeing if there were any new seeds I could get, like this carrot seed. And of course, more copper. Back at the farm, my seed collection was growing drastically, so I had more crop plots to put down to be able to hold all of them. My morning routine of watering my plants and planting new ones was starting to get a bit tedious, mostly because my water reserves were limited, and having to go back and forth to the river was a bit annoying. So the second Mech upgrade I did was to increase my water tank capacity. But I had another task to complete as well. I was to build a flower press, a place I could make paints. So I got the resources crafted and assembled for one of those. Then I quickly ran out to find color flour so that I could give it a test. I crafted some paint and it showed me how I could further customize my Mech. So now not only I could swap out the individual parts of my Mech, but I could also customize them with colors. Really cool. Personally, I like the red, but I figure once I get more upgraded parts, I can start making something a little more cool. Until then, I had lots of farming, exploring, and sludge clearing to do. I was trying to decide what the next upgrade from a Mech I should focus on. There were some really handy traversal upgrades like sprint speed and jetpack fuel, but I was really interested in getting the hose and vacuum upgraded so that I could continue clearing the higher level sludge and complete my main mission. However, some of the upgrades required a lot of the resources that I just didn't even know where to find them. So I wasn't quite there yet, but that just meant I had to go back out into the world for more discovery. And by the next day, some of my crops had finished growing and I had just enough resources to craft the things I needed to upgrade my water hose. I noticed I almost had enough stuff to do the vacuum as well. So I went to grab some copper quick and I was able to get that upgraded to level 2 also. Now I could really get to work and start clearing some of those tougher toxic sludge and weeds. The next day it was another morning of defending my crops. Now that I had so many, I was more concerned with these weeds destroying my yield. But they actually provided a valuable resource, this noxious pod. So these attacks were actually something I looked forward to. With my newly upgraded equipment, I headed into the yellow forest to start clearing the land. I cleared the sludge and weeds to fully restore the area. Piper jumped back in. She's been fairly quiet, which I don't mind. Her AI robot southern accent voice kind of throws me off, but she did give me some interesting bits about herself. She's a 3rd generation satellite, hence the name Piper, spelled with a 3. Apparently humans have been searching for a new home for quite some time. The generations before her failed to find a successful planet, and now it's up to her to continue the mission. Another notch lit up on the mysterious door, and I knew we were well on our way to completing our mission. The next day I had a whole range of tasks. I had a bunch of new areas that I had to clear, and I also had another task. It was to reach a place with a good signal reception so that I could put down a radio tower. I headed toward my destination, and I found some more resources along the way. Zapper twigs, more seeds to plant when I could get home, and some blue crystals. But yet again, I was in need of more upgrades before I could harvest these. So I continued on to put down my radio tower up on the hill. Of course, I didn't have the resources, so I had to go all the way back to base. But on my way back, I got lost exploring a little more. I made my way into this tech-like cave, hoping to find some useful or interesting things inside. But it was really just a bunch of these collectible artifacts. I still didn't see a use for them other than just being some random thing to collect. so I was a bit disappointed, but it does look pretty cool in here. Anyway, after that short little detour, I went back and built my radio tower, so that I could communicate with someone on the planet nearby who was trying to send a signal to me. Turns out, they needed my help. They were in a bit of a pickle and were requesting that I help them send over some resources. But the radio tower provided me with a consistent location to perform missions. It will regularly populate with different people and requests asking for things. And if you help them, it's a good way to make some extra money for buying resources and mech parts. I chose to help him with some wheat delivery because it had a pretty good reward of $1,000. While in the area, I cleared a bit more toxic sludge and weeds. I was able to get Stepstone Peak fully cleared out by morning. More new resources meant more storage. Back at the farm, it was time to do a little more expanding and organizing. I also had a bunch of new seeds to plant and replant all my existing seeds too. And planting all these seeds started to get a little time consuming. I noticed at the mech upgrade station there was a seed shooter upgrade. When I first saw it, I thought it seemed kind of useless. Shooting the seeds was quite enjoyable, but there was a lot, so anything that could save me a little bit of time would be useful. I unlocked the seed shooter lock-on, not knowing that it is even more satisfying to use. But I had just planted all my seeds, so I didn't get to test it out right away. Instead, I got back to farming. I had a bunch more resources to collect and craft, including the new oils that I got from my new crops, and a few new things crafted with all the new stuff that I was getting, which also allowed me to upgrade my spike saw once more. Now I could harvest some of those higher level resources, and that's exactly what I did. I went back to the blue crystal location and I started farming some of that, and other things that I could now collect. I picked up another task to do from the radio tower. It was just simply to collect some blue color flower. I hadn't even seen wheat yet, so I figured I'd try to complete one of the tasks using a resource that I actually knew how to get. I used blue color flower earlier to make paint, so I already knew I had some. It was a new morning, so time to harvest my crops. I got new plants and items from the zapper twig, but it was also an opportunity to reseed my crops and test out the seed shooter. And man, oh man, is it enjoyable to use. My goodness. It really does make things more efficient, but it truly is so smooth. Oh, yeah, all those seeds at once. And it doesn't stop here either. There is an even bigger upgrade that you can do to make it even more satisfying. I didn't know exactly where to find color flowers, so I figured I'd just plant some instead in my backyard. And since I had them, I planted a bunch of other trees too. But I still had to wait for them to grow, and the merchant happened to be in town. So I stopped in to see what I could get now that I had a bit of money. I noticed she had wheat seeds, and they were pretty cheap. Since I didn't know where to find them, I just went ahead and bought them instead so that I could deliver my guy his goods. As I was farming more resources, I started to notice a lot of the nodes were just empty. But I learned that you need to feed the nests of the local wildlife in the area in order to fully populate the resources. So I crafted some of the fodder treats they like, and I found myself a nest. These Znorks were doing some weird stuff.
Should I be watching this?
I gave the treats to the nest and I let them be. Next morning, another round of noxious spores falling from the sky. And a good thing too, because I was in need of the noxious pod in order to craft power cores for certain mech upgrades. I think this is the only resource I've come across where I can't just find it out in the world. I have to wait for these events. So I made sure to vacuum all of them up because if they land, you don't get the valuable pod. I crafted a compost bin which allowed me to make fertilizer. Seems like a useful thing since crops take multiple days to grow, but I honestly couldn't figure out how to use it. It sprays with the water gun, but after using it on multiple occasions, it didn't appear to be doing anything. So that was something that I struggled to figure out. But my wheat had fully grown, so I was able to harvest it and deliver it to my guy at the radio tower. I collected my cash and I headed out to gather some more nearby resources. I spent most of the day farming a ton of stuff. I completed the other quest too, and I got the color flower from a girl, as well as fully feeding the nest in the yellow forest for a huge resource boost in the region. The next morning, I happily went back to planting more seeds, the most satisfying part of farming, and since the merchant was in town again, I checked out some of the mech parts that I could purchase. Still didn't have a ton of cash, but I figured I'd buy something just to see how it looks. I got the night engine and I put it on my mech's crotch. Now he looks like a transformer. I didn't have a lot of available options, so I just kind of played around with the mechanics and functions, but I ended up just leaving my basic mech intact. Once I get further through my progress of saving this world, then I figure I can have some fun with customizing. But I did still feel a need to keep expanding my base. I upgraded from a tent to a little cabin to increase my coziness factor, and I set up a few things to boost that factor. My storage demands continued to grow, but I could finally unlock a dedicated storage unit, a silo, which would allow me to store a ton of one resource. However, they were quite expensive and I had a lot of different types of resources, so I went with these sheds instead, which were much more practical. I did put up 2 silos though, so that I could at least stuff it with my most abundant resources, fiber and wood, which is also very heavy. And unfortunately the storage is by weight, so it fills up very quickly. I spent a good bit of time organizing and managing my resources. It's always a big task to move heavy things around, especially when you need to be organized like myself. I continued through the day expanding my base and just adding everything I could that I had available, like this barn and a furnace where I could now smelt my metal. My barn required some iron bars, which I was still in need of. I just got my smelter set up, but it was going to take some time to collect and smelt the iron. Plus, I need lots more wood. But once I gathered it, I finished off my barn. The barn provides the same boosted effects as these little shelters. So, now that I had it, I could move all my stuff inside. But as always, that takes a bit of time. So I spent some more time on the farm organizing and rearranging. I was still in search of some resources I hadn't come across yet. My map shows question marks where there are resources I haven't discovered. So, considering I had most of the map cleared at this point, I headed to the area I hadn't yet explored as much to see if I could find myself some more of the resources I needed to continue crafting newer items and upgrading my mech. I gathered some new seeds, the chromace, and some more color flowers. This area also had a ton of iron that I was desperately in need of. I ran around all day, restocking as many resources as I could. A new day was upon me, and I got back to my morning routine of planting crops. But I got my new chromace planted as well. And now that I continued to have more types of seeds, it was once again time to expand. I only recently unlocked these larger crop plots, so naturally it made sense to start putting these ones down. And just like any time I build something new, I have to basically rearrange my whole base. So I spent the rest of the day reorganizing once again. The next day I was focused on continuing to upgrade my mech. The last couple areas I needed to clear of the toxic sludge still required higher powered equipment, but these third tier upgrades were getting a bit pricey. They required a lot of the resources and a lot of crafted things. So I spent a lot of time farming a wide variety of resources. The iron bars actually take quite a while to craft. It is a 2-minute timer per bar, and so crafting the 5 or so I needed would take a whole 10 minutes, which is kind of a lot. So I figured it'd be best to craft an additional furnace to speed up the process by 2 times. I did the same for the oil presser. It doesn't take as long to make oil, but my demands were starting to increase, so pumping out oil faster was needed. Luckily though, you can pass the night and your crafting will continue to progress. So if you want to speed up the process, just craft at night and then go to sleep. But it still took a lot of steps to get what I was going after. I needed steel electronics for my next mech upgrade, and that required all sorts of things. I had to make steel bars by first smelting iron into an iron bar and then turning that into steel by combining it with coal. I had glass to make from the crystal, and so on and so on. A lot of steps and a lot of farming and crafting things. But eventually, I got there and I got all that I needed to upgrade my mech to be able to take on some of the tougher sludge. I added some additional upgrades as well, like improving my hose capacity and range to make my morning plant watering a bit quicker. I started a new day with all kinds of crops to suck up, and another attack from falling weed seeds. But I took care of business and then set out to continue my quest to clear the toxic sludge. I made my way to the mountainside coast. I now had strong enough tools to clear the area. So I got to work, and in a matter of minutes, I had another area cleared. Piper came back in and was thrilled with my progress. She had been watching this planet for over 200 years, and she's never seen it look so vibrant. She was excited about the future potential of calling this a new home. But I still had a couple more areas to clear, so I headed over to the lowland plains to clear that area. And before the morning light came, I had yet another area brought back to life. It appeared there were more areas to clear. However, I unlocked the final light in this mysterious door, and when I did, sure enough, the door unlocked. I set out to explore this strange structure. I headed inside and I made my way through the alien-like building. Piper thinks it was some sort of ancient hydration system, but who knows. I continued down the pathways until I was presented with a bit of an obstacle. I had to restore power to the system in order to continue progressing through the automatic doors. Each room, a slightly more complex system needing different power attachments. Like any puzzle, it took me a few minutes to figure out exactly what I needed to do. I looked around the room for a little while until I eventually noticed a pattern on the screen. After spending probably 10 minutes annoyed and confused, the light in my head finally went on, and I realized what I was supposed to do. I connected the power supply in that pattern, and I was able to restore power. I obtained some kind of power core, and it gave me a new ability for my mech, the water walk. Now I don't have to die instantly every time I touch the water. And it made sense to get this, because the other area on my map seemed like it was an island. Now I knew exactly how I could actually get over there. Once I actually figured out how to use this new ability, I made my way out of this water pit. I was excited to finish my mission, so I instantly headed over to that next area. But one of the two areas was completely blocked off. I tried to skirt my way around, but eventually I realized this area is unfinished and it's supposed to be blocked off, which was kind of a bummer. I was looking forward to having more areas to explore, but that just meant I was down to the last area I needed to clear. I was excited to complete my mission, so I continued making my way over there. And just as I expected, I definitely needed my new ability to get to this island. Right away, I found some new resources. These were really the last unknown things I was looking for to craft some of the items. I continued to explore this island, making sure to unlock all the last resources. I was on the lookout for toxic weeds or slime, but I didn't see any. I noticed too that there was no meter telling me about my progress, so I guess this area didn't need to be restored, which just meant I was done. Mission complete. I realized that was it. I had no more progress to make. When that door unlocked, that was the final quest. It was a bit blindsiding, to be honest. I just got this great new traversal tool for my mech, and I was hoping there would be even more to explore and discover. But such is the case with an early access game. Despite having no more official things to do, there were definitely still some things I wanted to check out. So my time was not quite finished on this planet. I had spent a full day away from my farm, and when I got back, the whole thing was weeded. With the new seeds I got from that island, I now once again had to expand my crops even more, so I got some more crop plots put down. I upgraded my mech's spike saw damage so that I could harvest those cool rainbow-colored looking nodes. I cruised back out to the island to harvest some of that fractile ore and continued to do some more exploring. I tried to explore every little area and make sure I collected and unlocked all the resources in each area. Seeing if there was anything interesting or cool that I missed out on or I could find, I ran around just admiring this beautiful world until the end of the day. Back on the farm the next day, I started with my morning watering routine, and then I added a few additions to my farm. It was mostly about organizing. The storage is still a problem, and I've only unlocked this second-tier storage shed, so I had to make a bunch of them. I'm not even sure if there is even higher-tier storage. And that took a lot of time, though. But once I finished tidying up the farm, I wanted to check out the plow mech upgrade. So I got the resources crafted, and then I upgraded my mech. This upgrade turns him straight up into a plow. It's a really cool way to create paths. You can remove land and create dirt paths, or you can replace it with grass. You can create a stone path for an aesthetic, and with one additional upgrade, you can also create plowed fields, so that you can plant crops literally anywhere without a crop plot. It's an amazing upgrade, and it really allows you to max out your farming capabilities. Unfortunately for me though, I was nearing my end of the journey. It would have been fun to unlock this early on. I probably would have gotten super lost in the farming aspect. I can imagine the satisfying feeling of seeding a massive field of crops. It would honestly be quite enjoyable. But before my time was up, I still had some undiscovered resources. The honey bottle was something I hadn't seen, so I set out to see if I could find some. And after quite a bit more exploring, I finally came across some. I really only needed it for some of the other mech upgrades. At this point, I had unlocked all the available resources, and all the things that I could craft with them. I upgraded my mech as much as I wanted to see its new abilities. All the other mech upgrades were just further strengthening the current abilities that I already had, so there wasn't much need to try them out. and I discovered most of the items and buildings you can craft. And while I didn't 100% this world, I felt pretty complete, and I was really satisfied by how much I did accomplish. So, my time on this alien world was coming to an end. I fully intended to spend 100 in-game days here, but I literally just ran out of stuff to do. I'd love to continue exploring this world for another 50 days, once more of the world becomes available to explore, or once there is more resources to discover and more things to craft. But until that happens, until more content is added, I have reached the end of my journey. Overall, I had an amazing experience saving this planet. It was incredibly satisfying, harvesting and farming, and just the light exploring in my clunky mech. It's a nice gem of a cozy game, and if you're looking for something peaceful and relaxing, this is definitely worth checking out. But thank you all for coming along this journey with me. I hope you enjoyed your time here and had some fun. Until the next one, be well.